Amen.
Reverend Dr. Paul Blow is going to introduce Dr. Professor Kang to us. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Jenny. 안녕하세요. 호주 연합교회 남호주 주총회 선교국에서 주최하는 이 특별 강연에 참여하신 이 자리에 계신 여러분과 그리고 호주 안에 멜번, 시드니 그리고 멀리 미국과 한국에서 온라인으로 참여하시는 모든 분들을 환영합니다. 강남순 교수님에 대해서 한국 분들은 잘 알고 계시기 때문에 지금부터 이제 영어로만 간단하게 소개하려고 합니다. It is a great joy and privilege to welcome our distinguished international guest speaker tonight, Dr. Namsoon Kang, Kang Namsoon 교수님. Dr. Kang is a professor of theology and religion at Wright Divinity School, Texas Christian University in the United States. She has previously taught at both the University of Cambridge in UK and the Methodist Theological University in her home country of South Korea, reflecting the global reach and depths of her academic journey. She is a sought-after speaker and respected voice in theological, philosophical, and ethical conversation around the world, having delivered lectures and keynote addresses across Asia, Africa, Europe, the Americas, and the Pacific. Many of you, some of you may have known that her through her contribution as a plenary speaker at the 9th Assembly of the World Count Churches in Brazil, a clear testament to her deep engagement with the global ecumenical movement. Dr. Kang's work is richly transdisciplinary and firmly grounded in a commitment to justice. She teaches and writes in both English and Korean. I have displayed 3 books recently published in South Korea, and her scholarship weaves together cosmopolitanism, post-colonialism, feminism, Derridean thought, and the intersection of theology and global ethics. Her critical and courageous voice challenges us to think more deeply about what it means to live faithfully and faithfully in an interconnected, unjust, and ever-changing world. 저와 함께 강남순 박사님을 따뜻한 환영의 마음으로 맞아주시기를 바랍니다. Please join me in giving a warm Adelaide welcome to Dr. Namsoon Kang.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I was thinking that I give a lecture and I always pay attention to the introduction. Who am I? Because a person has exteriority. It's like a building, exteriority and then interiority, right? Whenever people introduce me, they always, of course, they have to, list what the lecturers or speakers have been doing. So it is revealing only exteriority of who I am, right? But I think the event like this, face-to-face event like this, I hope that you get near to my interiority of who is Namsoon Kang. And even the name, on the one hand, it is me, but on the other hand, it has nothing to do with me because it was not my chosen things. I was given. So one of the seminar that I offer in my class is a Jacques Derrida. And he says, even, Jacques Derrida was born in 1930 in Algeria. Even one sentence, you can go on and on and on all day long, even just one sentence. So last time I was in Korea in July. I left Korea July 3, and then for the Texas, and then I left Texas July 6th because I got an invitation by Monash University in Melbourne. So I had to be on flight 17 hours, 30 minutes, like you did. I was preparing for this lecture because it was, I got an invitation from Dr. Ko not long ago. So it was a very interesting time, how life going beyond our prediction and expectation, which makes us so exciting, right? So it was really interesting to see what kind of Namsoon Kang has to be presented in Adelaide. Interestingly enough, I don't have any personal contact in Monash University, and all of a sudden I got an invitation, not by religion or theology department, but by the Department of Film, Media, and Journalism. Isn't it really interesting? I'm known as a philosopher, theologian, and then all of a sudden, why film, media, and journalism? So I was so intrigued by this invitation. And then now the Korea is very well known by Korean, K-pop, K-drama, K-thing, K-food, everything about K. Even K-democracy, right? So they are intrigued by this K thing. So I was invited to talk about K Christianity. Isn't it very interesting?
Yes.
And my perspective about K Christianity is, in a way, very critical. So one of my recent book is the Jesus the Philosopher. The reason why I was working, if I knew that the Library of Uniting College doesn't have my English book, I would have brought my books in English. So, but Jesus the Philosopher was one of my recent books. The reason why I decided to work on Jesus the Philosopher is that what's going on with Christianity in Korea, from my perspective, is very problematic, because in the name of Jesus, they are betraying the spirit of Jesus. So in Monash, for 3 days, I was talking about the Christianity as it is, and then Christianity as it ought to be, right? It's not just Korea. It is really universal, so-called phenomena that the Christianity is becoming a kind of capitalized religion. I don't have to mention about what's going on with Christian churches with Trumpism, right? We have a Trump Bible. So Trump is selling Christianity to maximize his power. So at a Monash workshop, we had a very interesting conversation, what's going on. Not only, Christianity in Korea, but also the Christianity in general in the world, what's going on. So that's why I, came to Melbourne, right? And then Dr. Ko invited me to Adelaide. So it was a very interesting sort of connection, and I was just so excited to experience Adelaide. I love Beethoven Adelaide. So if I pronounce Adelaide, Adelaide, forgive me, right? So I get confused, Adelaide and then Adelaide in Beethoven music. Yeah. I think some of you might know the song. Yeah. Yeah, that's one of my favorite songs. So I hope that even your physical presence is in a way a kind of welcoming gesture. Whether or not you intended to welcome me, but your presence itself, for me, it is your physical, ontological. Your presence is a welcoming gesture of my presence in Adelaide. Adelaide, yeah. I think I was briefly talking, conversing with your, what do you call here, headmaster or principal. I was in Cambridge. I mean, each college has a different name. So yeah, principal. That I think giving lecture is like playing jazz music. So you improvise. I have 15 pages of lecture notes, but I don't know how many pages I can go. But uh, now I don't have any obligation to go through 50 pages. That's why I do not use PPT, PowerPoint, because that's against my teaching philosophy, right? When you provide, PPT 30 screen, I mean, I have to go through all those, PowerPoint, but I decided not to use the PowerPoint because this face-to-face encounter is much more than just going through the, like a banking education. I have to transmit what I know to your account. I don't believe in that kind of encounter, whatever occasion that is. So I will just play like a jazz music, I would improvise whatever Holy Spirit works. So you never know. When you see the title of this lecture, what has come to your mind? Anyone who give any thought about what kind of title is this? Anyone? Because when I was trying to give Dr. Ko the title of this lecture, I was so ambitious because this is my first visit in my life journey to Adelaide, and this is the first time that I encounter the people in Australia. Not the Monash University; they are all the faculty, yeah, the scholars. But here, I don't know what to expect, right? I don't know who is going to come. I have no idea what kind of background they would have. So my sense of expectation goes wide, right? So I became so ambitious. I want to deal with all kinds of issues that I think is important. So I think if you read the title, you can notice that, oh, she is so ambitious. How can she deal with such a complex issue in such a limited time? So I would control my sort of ambition because I know that there is a time constraint. But still, I really wanted to think about what this title would mean because it has so many even complex ideas like neighbor love, hospitality, cosmopolitanism, leadership, multiculturalism. Perhaps if you take like a semester hour long class, I couldn't even deal with all those issues. But ambitiously enough, I decided to give this kind of a complex title to give you an idea that, these are the point of entry. That's why I did something that I hardly do for other lecture. I provide handout to you. Do you have the handout? This is actually the first time. He didn't even ask to provide handout. I voluntarily decided to provide some handout because the issue is so complex to deal with. So I hope that you take this handout with you, and then even later on, you just reflect on what's going on. So if you take the handout, do I have the handout? Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I have my own printing. I call it philosophical and theological reflection, and then I say the epistemological points of departure. These, these provide you a kind of background of where do I enter, because whatever you do, you have to begin somewhere. This is my point of entry. This is my perception of neighbor love, perception of reading, which is really crucial part in leadership issues. And this is my point of entry about what Christianity should be. So and what the key points of Jesus' teaching, etc., 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 which can be the common ground of our epistemological point of entry. I hope that you understand. So you have 6 pages of handout. So that's your homework to do. That's your homework, not just my homework, your homework. For example, the epistemological point of departure, reading is an ethical and political responsibility. And reading is not self-evident. If I have more time, one of the things that I am asked by my school, when there is a new student orientation, I have 3 kinds of theme that they usually ask for me to give a faculty lecture. Is one of the things is reading. What constitutes reading? Because so I have been lecturing about reading as a faculty lecturer for the new students for 2 hours. What is reading? Because reading is not self-evident. So there's a close reading. I feel so sorry about those who are taking online because they didn't get the handout, right? Do I get to see them, or do they see my back all the time? Not face?
Just the face, yeah.
Not face, my face.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's good. So if I move around, would that be all right?
I can show.
Oh, so I will give you just a couple of, the types of reading that I'm mentioning, because when I use the reading is an ethical and political responsibility, I'm not talking about just reading, okay, reading one book from page 1 to, the end of the book. I'm not talking about that kind of reading, but since we don't have any time, I will just list what constitutes reading. There is a close reading and double reading, cross reading, double reading, and cross reading, double reading, and then patient reading, and deconstructive reading. I mean, you can go on and on and on, because reading is, in a way, autobiographical. Even if you read one chapter together, the meaning and your interpretation will be different. I think even imagine that after this lecture, you may be asked, okay, what is your understanding of the lecture, what she is talking about? I think if we have a 30 participant, you may have a 30 different kind of note. So usually one of the practices I do in my class is that what was a 3 point from previous session. Then it's really interesting. All the students, they have a 3 points differently. That's why exactly reading, interpreting, even listening is autobiographical. You are reading yourself. You are listening yourself. You are writing yourself. Everything is autobiographical. So you can add autobiographical reading. So no one can dictate that my reading is the absolute interpretation. No, even the teacher cannot dictate the meaning of their lecture or class. So I really respect autobiographical reading. So I think when I was working on this handout, because of the time constraint, but still I was so ambitious. I was really thinking that you can take this handout to reflect on what's going on. So reading, because reading has something to do with the world. And reading, what do you read? Derrida says the world is the text. So here reading is not just the book, one newspaper. You have to read the event. You have to read what's going on. You have to read something in between. So reading in that particular sense, reading is our ethical, political responsibility as a leader of society. And I don't know about you individually, but the moment that you decide to come to this event, I regard you as a leader of your community, whatever. And also you have to a leader of yourself. And then the blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice. Jesus, right? So all the quote that I decided to put has something to do with what I am going to say about neighbor love, hospitality, and cosmopolitan leadership in a multicultural world. So, and once in a while, when I was doing my lecture, I will ask you to read one of the handout with me. So I hope that you pay attention to what I'm trying to say, because unless you become intentional, nothing comes automatically. So if you are not tired enough, I would ask you to share what are the concepts that comes to your mind. Just freely you can share. This is a concept that I'm gonna take, for example. Okay, so my concept of this evening, something like that. Yeah, so if you are willing, I would ask you around what are the concepts that you will take from here. So why cosmopolitanism or multiculturality and locality of the world? I think that the notion of cosmopolitanism came from the Greek philosophy, especially the Diogenes of Sinope. He was asked, "Where are you from?" So if someone asks me, "Where are you from?" If someone asks you, "Where are you from?" what would be your response?
America.
Okay, see, America. How about you? Where are you from?
A loving family.
Okay, loving family. How about you? If someone asks you, "Where are you from," Jenny?
At its core, the people of God.
Oh, people of God. See, even this seemingly simple question can mean so many different things. When I first left Korea long ago for Germany, all of a sudden, wherever I go, people ask me the question, "Where are you from?" Right? At that time, I didn't have any, idea what they are asking for. So I automatically, okay, I'm from Korea. Then they would ask, okay, South Korea or North Korea? I'd say, of course, South Korea. And then after a couple of years, I feel so uncomfortable. And then I was giving my thought that what kind of implication, socio-political implication, this seemingly simple question would have. So I researched, "Where are you from?" And then I encountered this cosmopolitanism. This Diogenes of Sinope, when he was asked, he says, "I am from cosmos." He is supposed to say, "I am from Sinope," or "I am from Athens, I am from, the town of birth." But he replied, "I am from cosmos." That's the beginning of this idea of cosmopolitan citizenship. Of course, at that time, he didn't articulate all the theoretical ideas about this cosmopolitan citizenship, but this notion of "I am from cosmos" becomes such a sort of turning point of where do you belong. So the cosmopolitanism, the basic idea is that all the human beings, they have two belongings. One is the belonging of this place of birth, and the other belonging is we all belong to the sun. So you have the particular belonging, which has something to do with your citizenship, right? But the other belonging is a kind of cosmic belonging. All, living beings belong to the sun. So if you translate this cosmopolitan citizenship into Christian languages, what would that be? You say children of God. Right? That's what you said. We are the children of God. If we translate into the philosophical terminology, there's a cosmic citizenship. We also belong to the cosmos. That's the idea of cosmopolitanism. And then Immanuel Kant, he was the one who popularized this notion of cosmopolitan rights and cosmopolitan hospitality, because he was worried about this rise of nationalism, that it would really ruin the world peace. So he thought that the only way that we can really sustain this peace is practicing cosmopolitan rights and cosmopolitan hospitality. So I was really struck by his notion of world citizenship, because he says, when you offer this hospitality, what is hospitality to you? When you hear the term hospitality, what word comes to your mind? What is hospitality?
Food.
Food, right? Like the food. That's
A practical expression of welcome.
exactly, yeah. We're welcoming the other. And then we have to de-romanticize this notion of hospitality, because it's not just okay, you smile at someone, a stranger, and then okay, welcome you. That's not the hospitality in our real world. So who is the host and who is the guest, right? So when you talk about hospitality, you have to think about who is the host and then guest. And then how to draw the line between host and guest. I don't know about here, but in the States, when you welcome your guest to your house, what the host would say usually, make yourself at home, right? That's the kind of general practice that, okay, when you receive your guest, you say, make yourself at home. But there's a second sentence that people do not say, but everybody knows that there is a second, sentence, which is, but remember, I am the host. So simply because the host say, okay, make yourself at home, doesn't mean that you just go to the bedroom and then, open the drawer, or, you just open the refrigerator. No. So there is a kind of conditional hospitality. So we have to think about, okay, there is a kind of conditional hospitality and then unconditional hospitality. That's another, the dimension. The other dimension is that if you expand this notion of hospitality to the public world, what happens? Personally, so there is a tension between private hospitality and then state public hospitality. And there is this is the actual story, happened long ago in Paris. There is a woman who invited the so-called illegal, in quotation mark, illegal immigrant to her house, because she was practicing her neighbor love, hospitality to the stranger. But later on, because in France at that time, you are supposed to report to the authority that, if you are so-called illegal immigrant, but she didn't, because she is practicing her hospitality and neighbor love. But when your private hospitality are in conflict with state hospitality, what would you do? She was arrested as a criminal. So you are simply practicing your hospitality to the stranger, right? Welcoming the other. But you are criminalized. You became criminal. What do you do? So this notion of a cosmopolitan hospitality becomes so important nowadays because nowadays this issue of refugee, issue of non-documented workers becoming so crucial in many countries. So what do you do with these hospitality issues? It's not just welcoming the other, and then how to draw the boundary between host and the guest. And it is really interesting. If you remember the Jesus, the story of Zacchaeus, I think I put it in your handout. And what do you remember about this story? Jesus encounter. I know that we have a couple of New Testament scholars. My approach to this New Testament will be different from your approach. Whenever I read this text, the encounter, the Jesus and Zacchaeus, what do you read? What do you read? I think I put it. Can anyone? Page 5. Yes, page 5. Why don't we? I will give you just a minute to go through the story, and then you read as if this is the first time that you read this story. Don't rely on your memory. So I will quote from Derrida. He says, whenever I read Kant, it is always first time. For me, whenever I read Derrida, it is always first time. I think if you are sincere Christian, you would say, whenever I read the Bible, it is always first time. So try to read this story as if it is the first time, for the first time in your life. And then underline what comes to your mind so that I can have a drink. 1 minute. Can anyone share? Just briefly, what really intrigues you? Because I want to say about how Jesus' mode of seeing would be. And that's something to do with this notion of hospitality. And then what does it mean to follow Jesusian leadership or cosmopolitan leadership? I interpret Jesus' leadership as a cosmopolitan leadership. So I have so many issues that I want to connect to this story. Anyone who wants to share? What comes to your mind? And most Bible quotation I got from Inclusive New Testament.
I'm interested in how Zacchaeus has to climb a tree in order to see Jesus because of his height, and that what works for the rest of the crowd doesn't work for him, and he has to go out of his way to find something that works for him to see Jesus.
Good, good. Again, reading is autobiographical. So there is no like absolute, interpretation of what we read. That's why I, introduced a quote from Nietzsche. There are no facts, only interpretations, which open the kind of postmodern idea of what it is. So every reading that you have is autobiographical, your interpretation. So simply because I'm a lecturer, speaker, I cannot dictate the meaning of this text. I'm just sharing my own autobiographical reading. So anyone, just one more person?
I was just interested that it actually said it was a sycamore tree. Like it actually identified what kind of tree it was. That seemed rather unusual for me.
Oh, okay. Interesting. One more person?
I noticed that Zacchaeus is in a hurry to do everything.
Aha.
Ran ahead. Then Jesus said, Zacchaeus, hurry up and come down. Then Zacchaeus quickly climbed down. And then at the end, he said, immediately I will give half my belongings. Well, that was-
Very interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I really want to engage in this text, for a long time. But for example, you are the sort of crowd. Imagine that Jesus was somewhere that people really want to see Jesus. So there are crowd. And then why Jesus? All of a sudden, look up the tree. Because he didn't have to look up around. I mean, because there are crowd, the majority, the center of everything. So my interpretation is Jesus' mode of seeing the world is always double. Not only center, but also the margin. And if you ask how come Jesus knows his name, I think that's not the question that you have to ask. That's the pointless question. We do not know how Jesus knew his name. But the point is, he paid attention to the person who are on the margin, not in the center. Again, it's my autobiographical interpretation. And then if you go on, what did he say? He didn't say, Zacchaeus, I know what you have done, so repent, right?
Yeah.
As if you are, you hear this kind of thing in the church. You repent your sin. Very judgmental. But what did he say? Hurry up. Come on. I'm going to stay at your place. Okay. You have to add at your place. I was typing in a hurry. So please add at your place today. So here, what is it? Jesus is inviting himself to Zacchaeus' house. It is reversing this our traditional notion of host and guest. Usually, the host invites the guest, but unconditional hospitality is hospitality not just by invitation but also visitation. So it is really revealing the complex issue of hospitality. Right? So Jesus becomes the host, and we do not know who is the host and the guest. All of a sudden, this rigid binary between host and guest becomes blurry. So Jesus was inviting himself to Zacchaeus' house, and then he never mentioned about, I know what you have done, you have to repent. No, there is no religious judgment that we usually think. He was really practicing the genuine hospitality. I'm going to spend time with you. So when when Jesus says, I'm going to stay at your place, what does it mean? I'm going to eat with you. I'm going to converse with you. I'm going to spend some time with you. There's a genuine sort of a practice of hospitality that reverses host and guest. And then all of a sudden, what happens? Zacchaeus becomes a new person. Jesus didn't even say that you have to repent your life. What you have done is wrong. No, Jesus didn't have any kind of so-called religious sort of a preaching or whatever. But all of a sudden, this genuine practice of hospitality by Jesus transformed the Zacchaeus. So he becomes a subject of the change and transformation. It is really interesting. The parable or story in the Bible, because it has so many different issues that we can address. So, example, in cosmopolitanism, there's no boundary. So one of the motto that you can remember about cosmopolitanism is everyone, everywhere. Many people get confused with cosmopolitanism with universalism. One of the critical difference is cosmopolitanism begins with here, your face, the ethics of singularity. you can say ethics of singularity. Whereas this modern universalism begins from here above. So the cosmopolitanism begins with here below, begins with the face. So what do you mean by face? My teaching philosophy is philosophy of face by Levinas. And Levinas, he says, face is the ethical side. When you encounter face, even if you don't need any name, you don't need to know name, right? So he says, face precedes name. Even if I do not know your name, right, Kate Baker, when I look at your face as a, the empirical side, I cannot say that you are wrong, because when you encounter the face is the site of ontological recognition of who you are, who am I. So I think given this information age, I mean, why do we need to have a face-to-face, event like this? I always say that encountering the face of the other is the beginning of everything. And I'm not the only person. And the Hannah Arendt, she says, genuine friendship requires physical presence. Genuine friendship requires physical presence. Because when you encounter someone face to face, I always say that there is a treaty of languages, right? I don't know whether someone else used the term, but I use it, a treaty of language. One is the language of writing, language of speaking, and language of body. And I think the most important language is the language of body. When you look at someone, the gaze, you just notice that whether this gaze is gaze of hospitality or gaze of curiosity, gaze of hostility, or gaze of suspicion. You just know. You look at the gaze. I think when I think about this story, the encounter between Jesus and Zacchaeus, I think that Zacchaeus, when he looked at the Jesus, I think that would be the first time that in his entire life that someone is looking at me with such a hospitable gaze, regard me as an equal human being. And this gaze, this language of body changed everything. That's my interpretation again. And here, some New Testament scholar would not agree with me, but I didn't speak with Jesus personally, but that's my interpretation. Otherwise, how come such a thing could happen? If Zacchaeus was moved by this gaze, and then this gesture of hospitality that I'm going to stay at your place today. For the first time, Zacchaeus might have experienced that someone is treating me as an equal human being, treating me with dignity, treating me without having any judgmental gaze. That's my interpretation. So in a way, cosmopolitan spirit is, from my perspective, goes along with the Jesus spirit, the teachings and life of Jesus that will embrace everyone, everywhere, without having any borderline of gender, race, religion, language, and everything that we usually draw the boundaries. So actually, Jesus is not talking about religion. Jesus is talking about how to live together, how to live well together. So that's our homework, that what does it mean to live well together? So there are so many biblical, Jesus the teaching about how to live well together. That's what I really want you to follow. That's the Jesus way and truth and life. So if we go on, in this 21st century, there are so many issues that are really troubling nowadays. For example, when you talk about diversity or multiculturalism, I haven't really into these issues because in my university as well, there are so many ways that to talk about multiculturalism and diversity. And we have to remember, usually when we talk about diversity and multiculturalism, there are two ways. One is critical, uncritical multiculturalism and critical multiculturalism. Uncritical diversity and multiculturalism, and critical diversity and multiculturalism. If I say just simply, one of the danger of uncritical diversity is that usually who is determining this the multiculturality? Okay, if you are categorized as Asian, categorized as African, categorized as something, all of a sudden your singularity becomes suppressed. So you carry the mark of the plural. That's a kind of post-colonial term, mark of the plural. So that mark of the plural, mark of the plural. So your individuality, your singularity disappear. So you are categorized onto something. Okay, you Asian, you Korean, you Chinese, you African. This kind of category and celebrating the so-called multiculturality, your individuality and singularity disappear. This is one of the danger of this celebrating diversity, celebrating multiculturality. So when we say we are living in a multicultural world, I really always introduce the Homi Baba, one of the post-colonial the Trinity. Homi Baba, have you heard the name Homi Baba? He popularized the term hybridity, right? So when we say culture, who is determining the nature of the culture? When you say, for example, African culture, who is going to decide? When you say Asian culture or Korean culture, who is going to decide what constitutes certain culture? There is always power dynamics. Whenever I go to the Asian conference, I'm regarded as an inauthentic Asian. I'm inauthentic Asian because I do not fit that, this perception of Asian. When I was in Cambridge, I met the Queen Elizabeth and her husband, Prince Philip. At the time, I didn't have any iPhone, so I regret that I didn't have any photo. There was the grand opening of Faculty of Divinity in Cambridge, and so the Queen and Prince, they came to the opening. There are so many people outside the faculty building, so we were advised every 3 minutes what we are supposed to do. So we are supposed to do, standing in front of our own office, do not initiate any conversation. That's the kind of protocol that we were given, all the instruction. So you just stand just in front of your office, and then you say, you do not ask any question. So we were standing. And if you are a woman, you have to give a kind of special gesture. But I didn't do it because I don't want to practice how to do it. And then all of a sudden, the Prince Philip stand in front of me. So people was really looking at me. Oh wow, what he's gonna do? He asked me 3 questions. Do you know what? The first question is, because at that time, in retrospect, I'm the only person who doesn't have any white body, right? Who doesn't have any so-called Anglo-Saxon sort of body. He stopped in front of me and then asked question, where are you from, right? So I said, oh, yeah, at that time I wanted to say I'm from Cosmos, but I know what he means. Where are you from? So I said, I am from Korea. And then the second question, can you take a guess? What would be the second question?
North or south?
Oh, no, I think he didn't know about North or South. The second question was, are you Christian?
Oh.
Because if I, come from the East, no, she might be Buddhist or something like that. But, this is a divinity school, the faculty of divinity. So, are you Christian? So I said, I don't want to have a theological, discussion. So what do you mean by Christian? So I said, yes. And then the third question is, what do you teach? So later on, people says that's the honor of your family, that you engage with a conversation with the Prince Philip. Right? And this is the perception that I'm the only person who do not have any white body. Right? And then all of a sudden, I am homogenized. So if she is from non-Western country, she might not be the Christian, right? And this is the faculty of divinity. This is my interpretation in retrospect. I try to interpret what are the nature of these three questions that I received. And then this is my interpretation. I am all of a sudden, okay, homogenized. The mark of the plural. I do not have any singularity from his perspective. He's from, she's from the East, right? So she might not be the Christian because Christianity is the religion of the West. That might be his perception. He might never met any person who do not, from Asian body. I don't know, but that's how this multiculturality and celebrating this diversity, cultural diversity, can end up. And so you have to ask this question. I come up with this 13, let me see. I said I become so, okay, this politics of multiculturalism and celebrating diversity, there are danger. No, you don't have any 13 points. I have my, not 13 points. I come up with 17. Can you be patient? I will just read the title. Okay. Homogenization, right? Uncritical multiculturalism, uncritical celebrating the diversity can have this kind of danger. Homogenization, tokenization, collectivization, totalization of heterogeneous selves and subjectivity, exoticization, essentialization, stereotypization. My students, except me, their mother tongue is English, and they said, we are learning English from you. Because there are so many terms that I use that is underlined as red, right? It's a wrong spelling, but stereotypization, not ahistoricization. You are frozen to the past. That's what I mean. It's celebrating multiculturalism. Sometimes you are frozen to the past. That's what I mean. Ahistoricization and romanticization and commodification, often with good intention, and overlooking issues of systemic injustice. You just celebrate all the colors, but you do not pay attention to the injustice issues that happens between cultures, in the name of diversity. And justification of the so-called culturalist alibi, which is a term by Gayatri Spivak, one of the post-colonial thinker. Culturalist alibi. People use the culture as an alibi to ignore justice issues, human rights issues. They would say, oh, that's Western culture. But my culture is not along with sexual minority issues or whatever. So many people use culture as a cultural alibi. So that's one of the danger of this uncritical celebration of multiculturalism and diversity. And then hidden ethnocentrism. Still, all the diversity discourse and multiculturalism discourse is still West-centered. Who is determining the culture? Many my works is very critical about this stereotyping and homogenizing, so-called hidden ethnocentrism by Western scholars. Even these issues is done by non-Western scholars. They are enjoying this tokenization, exoticization of their own culture. And the other issues is politics of representation in paradox. And then 15, overlooking the intersectionality. Because we are not black and white any longer. There is always everything that intersect. But we are overlooking that kind of issues. And 16, disappearance of ethics of singularity that I mentioned here. And then 17, cultural balkanization. But next time we have to have all day long seminar to deal with all the issues. And then the neighbor love as just hospitality that I mentioned in this lecture title. This neighbor love has been really romanticized in the church. They say, okay, we love our neighbors. Have you ever wrestled with this notion of neighbor love? This is such a big issue. It's not just we chant in the church, okay, let's love our neighbor, and then that's it. We do not do our homework. This is such a harsh question, how to love our neighbors. And Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. Do you know how to love yourself? I do not. I have been wrestling with this issue, how to love myself. What does it mean to love myself? Because usually in the church culture, loving yourself is really identical with egoism, right? If you love yourself, you have to sacrifice yourself. No, Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. So Hannah Arendt would say, those who do not know how to love yourself, they do not know how to love neighbor. So we have to practice how to love myself. It is a lifelong task. Lifelong task. How to love myself. Otherwise, you do not know how to love your neighbor. And then the other question that we have to think about is, what is the circle of neighbor to me? How about you? When you say neighbor, who to include, who to exclude? What is your circle of neighbor in your life journey? And then Jesus didn't stop there. Jesus even, go further. Love your enemy, right? So the self-love, you have to here, you have self here. So we have to practice how to love myself. And then you have to expand neighbor love. You have to add you here, right? Right? And then you have to expand enemy. What does this mean? isn't really cosmopolitan spirit, right? So-called enemy. I think Jesus would say so-called enemy. If we categorize the group of people enemy, actually it's not enemy. Unless you deconstruct this notion of enemy, how can you love the enemy as yourself, the neighbor as yourself? So if you just read later on, read your handout, there's a saying that if you do not know how to love, you do not know how to love God. So that's why John Caputo says religion is for lovers. Religion is for lovers. Religion is not just about doctrines. Religion is for lovers. Once in a while, I used to teach the one of the class, the history and doctrine of United Methodist Church. Something that I do not want to teach, but there was a professor who used to teach that course, but when she's on leave, the school asked me to offer that course because, my area is very similar to that. And then I always said that if Jesus were here, because United Methodist Church, this ordination process is such a hectic process. It takes like 7 years, and you have to go through all different kinds of interview system and exam, everything. So I said, I think that Jesus, if Jesus were trying to get ordination, I think that he would have failed even in the first stage. Because you have to provide a kind of template answer. For example, do you believe in Jesus' physical resurrection? What are you supposed to say? I mean, you're not having a kind of theological discussion. Well, no, resurrection you can be interpreted in many different ways. No, you have to give a kind of template answer. Yes, I do believe in Jesus' physical resurrection. So I think Jesus is not someone who just offered the template answer. He was, in a way, very rebellious. For example, this Sabbath. At that time, it was the absolute law, right? But he was really rebellious. So John, one of the German theologians that I like, Dr. Jelle, she said, what is Sunday? What is Sunday to you? She said Sunday is a rebellion against every day. Just going to the church on Sunday and then you just continue to think about all the stuff that you usually think in your everyday. That's pointless. Sunday is, in a way, you have to really rebellious of every day because you have to think about something that you usually do not think in your daily life. You encounter yourself on Sunday. Otherwise, it's pointless. It's pointless to going to church. And in a way, Jesus was rebellious about almost everything. And his standard is what? The life. Everything about religion, doctrine, everything is, in a way, if it is against the human life or living beings, Jesus becomes rebellious. Sabbath. Because the central idea is how to practice love, how to practice hospitality. So Matthew 25, I think that this text should be the missional text in Christianity. Do you know the Matthew 25? I think in the handout, I don't know what page, the handout. Yes, 5. I think that this is a really serious text because it is labeled as last judgment, right? Last judgment. And then look at the categories. I was so shocked, right? the hungry, the thirsty. How did you do with the hungry, the thirsty, the naked, the sick, the stranger, the imprisoned? Do you have any clue that he was talking about Christianity as a religion? For example, he didn't ask, did you go to church every Sunday? Did you offer, tithe offering every Sunday? The question itself is not about religion. It is about how to live well together. The practice of responsibility, the practice of hospitality, the practice of neighbor love. And this is a kind of Jesus teaching. So when we say, I am the way, when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and life, what does it mean? How do you interpret? And Jesus was not conscious about this, the existence of Christianity. And he was not even Christian. So when people say, interpret, I am the way, the truth, and the life, many people take this text as an exclusive position to other religion. But if you follow Jesus saying, I am the way, you have to follow this last judgment story. How did I do with the hungry, with the thirsty, with the sick, with the stranger, with the imprisoned? And then our homework is, who are the hungry nowadays in this 21st century? Who are the thirsty? Because it is not about just our body. Okay, who is hungry? I think I suppose you are hungry now because it's over dinner time. But there is always two kinds of hunger, physical hunger, and what? And then your spiritual hunger or your intellectual hunger, hunger for meaning. We need both our physicality and metaphysicality. We are looking for the meaning of life. We are not just living with all the food. We need more than just physical food. So we have to ask the question, who are the hungry? I think in a way, one way or the other, you are not just hungry for the food, but also the kind of meaning of life. That's why you decide to spend your time this evening. Somehow, you want to look for something that you cannot find from just eating the food. So this is like a big question. How do we live well together? And who to include in this circle of together? Some would say, okay, those who believe in other religion than Christianity, we cannot include them in our circle of neighbor. So we don't have to love them. Rather, we hate them, right? We condemn them. You go to hell because you are not Christian. Some people say, okay, if you practice homosexuality, you cannot come to this circle of neighbor. So we just condemn you, go to hell. I was in many different kind of queer parade, so-called queer parade. And I was just thinking about what would really Jesus do? In my class seminar, I always teach just masters and doctoral students. I have always a seminar, like 12, 13. I always have a sexual minority. Trans men, trans women, gay, lesbian. When I look at their face, who am I to judge? Right? This line becomes so famous because Pope Francis, he says to the news reporter, "Who am I to judge?" That was my personal experience as well. When I went to Germany first, like I said, And then I, moved to the United States. That was the first time that I encountered so-called sexual minority. Before, I never met any person who say I am gay or who say I'm lesbian. In Korea or in Germany, I've never met any person who talks about these sexual issues. So when I took the class seminar, and then we were introducing ourselves. And there's a person who was sitting across to me. And when we were introducing, he says, I'm gay. So that's the first time that I met so-called gay sexual minority in my life journey. So I thought in my mind, okay, I'm not gonna sit over there. Okay. Because when you sit the first time, it becomes a semester long your sit, right? So I to my mind, okay, I'm not gonna change my seat. I'm not gonna stay over there because I don't want to engage with him. I feel like he's just so odd. He's like really a weird person, strange. So I said, okay, I'm not gonna talk with him. Then one day, break time, he came to me and then look at my face, so we become closer. And then he said, oh, Namsoon, I heard that you come from Germany. And then for the first time, I really encounter his face. And in my mind, oh, he's a really same person like me. He's not really weird. And he was smiling at me without knowing my internal sort of, the distance that I tried to make with him. That was the first time that I began studying about what is homosexuality, why people become homosexual. So that is the beginning of my encounter of so-called sexual minority for the first time. And then I realized that this, facing the face of the other is the beginning of everything. And then I realized that Jesus was the one who always practiced this philosophy of face. It doesn't matter your identity. It doesn't matter what's your name, because your face itself is saying that I am here. I exist as an entire, human being. How can you, in what way you can judge about the person? You can deny his own being in the world. That was the first time that I began really realizing that we all are equal. Not through the theories, but through the encounter of the face of the other. So face becomes my sort of the one of the themes that I think is really changing my attitude about other people, regardless of their occupation, regardless of their gender, race, all the categories that we listed as a kind of denominator of categorizing, excluding, including everything. Face is a site of everything, ethical side. And I realized that this, my book, Jesus the Philosopher, indicates that Jesus was the one who tried to practice this philosophy of faith. It doesn't matter whether you are women or men. It doesn't matter whether you are Jews or Gentile. It doesn't matter whether you are whatever, poor, rich. He regards people as a genuine, equal being with dignity. So this cosmopolitan idea is resonating. All living beings in the world, they are equal human beings. So let me just introduce what are the key issues of cosmopolitan issues. Okay, I have to check my. Okay, do I have still time, right? I didn't even go the half of my lecture note. remember that there are some issues of this hospitality. One is ethics of hospitality, right? Okay, let me use some issues. The ethics of hospitality and politics of hospitality. And politics you can understand this ethics of hospitality as the unconditional hospitality. So unconditionality of conditional hospitality, and this could be conditional hospitality. So when you talk about hospitality, you have to think about these two parts. There is a politics of hospitality, and the other part is ethics of hospitality. And there is always huge discrepancy between these two parts. So remember these two parts all the time. And the other two parts that you have to remember is, like I said, private hospitality and public or state hospitality. The private hospitality and the state hospitality. If you extend this kind of theme to what's going on in the world, you can really deal with this issue of refugee, which is one of the world crisis that we are facing. How do we welcome the refugee? What are the conditions that we can accept? So this is always a kind of two-part that we have to remember. In a way, whatever you do, you have to remember the word O-R-N-D, word of already, and then word of not yet. Or word to come. And Christian terminology, the word of not yet is reign of God. And if you translate this Christian terminology into philosophical term, there can be a word to come. So we have to think about these two parts all the time, and then you end up being a daydreamer. You always dream the world to come, where all the people in the world are welcomed. Not only just with your smile, but also, institutionally, systemically, all people in the world should be welcome. So welcoming the epiphany of the faith as the key of hospitality. So in a way, what do we do when we say neighbor love? And then we have to think about justice. Because it is not just welcoming the other with your smile, but what do you mean by welcoming the other when there are so many injustices going on in the world? One of the classes that I created recently was enhancing justice literacy. Because one of the key issues that our school is dealing with is the justice. I noticed that we are not willing to expand our understanding of justice. So when I was providing a syllabus, I listed like 26 types of justice and injustice issues. And I asked my students how many justice that you are familiar with. Perhaps 5 or 6. And there are so many justice issues that people, even faculty and students, are not familiar with. For example, linguistic justice. People hardly pay attention to linguistic justice or spatial justice. was landscape justice. So we were learning together, learning a lot about justice. Because when you say labor law, hospitality, you have to think about justice as well, because welcoming the other requires justice. So I didn't know that there is such a thing like a landscape justice. Have you? So because, for example, you have to pay attention where this museum, for example, is located. Is it really the so-called poor people? Can they have easy access to what's going on in the city? And how this climate change can affect the poor people? Because even if you experience like a 30-degree or 40-degree, the way that you experience that temperature is different, from where you live. So there are there's district that has so many trees, right? Usually they enjoy, many people who are affluent, they enjoy the green, green things, the landscaping. But those people who are really living in a so-called gentrification area, they do not have any much trees that they enjoy. That's in a way kind of landscape justice. So there are so many issues that we have to pay attention if you want to really practice this neighbor law or hospitality, because ignorance cannot be an excuse. I think that's clear that you just this Matthew 25, there are people who are categorized into goat. What do they say? Oh, we didn't know that you're hungry. So I catch that line as, okay, ignorance cannot be an excuse. That means we have to be a life learner, lifelong learner. Until we die, we have to learn. Because nowadays our world becomes so complex, and there are so many issues that we are ignorant. So you have to keep, learning by taking classes over here, or taking, reading the text, or learning on your own. I believe in self-taught. So with these ideas, think about there are moral commitments that cosmopolitan leadership trying to do. What is this primary unit of moral concern is not just your community. Of course, this particular community that you belong, you have to pay attention. But at the same time, nowadays we do not have any luxury to become just local. That's why the term locality becomes really important. So before, the motto was think globally and act locally, right? It doesn't work any longer. So now think locally and act locally. Because the global and local, the boundary between global and local doesn't work nowadays. For example, you are using all the technical tools, and can you say this is just local? If you just analyze where this come from, some parts made in Korea, made in China, made in Vietnam, made in USA, everything becomes so entangled. So think locally, act locally, which requires this cosmopolitan consciousness. Everyone and everywhere. Good. Everyone, everywhere. So how do we practice this kind of cosmopolitan leadership? Is that I listed 15 types of leadership that you can take a look after this event. But the first one, great men, I say SIC. What does it mean? In academia, those who are in academia, you are familiar with this thing, yeah, SIC. The man, this exclusive language is not from me. So even if I do not agree with this kind of exclusive language, I just use it because that's what it says. So when I try to say I'm not agreeing with this kind of expression, we usually say SIC. So perhaps we should say great person theory, right? Not great man or great woman, but great person. So we have like 50 types of leadership style and theories. But here, I mean, we have to think about people say leader, but I noticed that there are 3 types of leader, and you have to be the leader of yourself first, and then you have to, be the leader of your own community of belonging. But I noticed that even if the person is called as a leader, the person can be the 3 types of leader. The one is, I said, manipulator. There are many political leaders, for example, and religious leader, Christian leader, who are manipulating people to maximize their power. Manipulator. And then second is really leader that really envision here and there. And then, so I'm going to talk about the leader, what kind of leader that we have to be. And then manager. Manager is the one who just maintains the status quo, right? Of course, if you are, leadership position, for example, maintaining this, this current system is important. But at the same time, if you do not envision the future to come, it becomes just a manager. It doesn't offer any kind of vision to the so-called follower. And if we have more time, I want to talk about the followership because we just end up talking about leadership, but I think also good leaders is the one who really make this, these followers more mature, becomes critical thinker and active agent. Otherwise, the leadership cannot play the important role, given society. So just to think about, there are so many kind of leadership style, and then what do we need? What do we need to engage in this complex world? So I will talk about this cosmopolitan leadership in 7 things. Okay, let me check the time. I know that I have to finish like 7 something, 30 something, so that we can have a Q&A time. So I will share what are the 7 components of cosmopolitan leadership that I think. One is the ethics of singularity, the one who practice this ethics of singularity. Because a follower is not just an issue. There is no like followers in general. If you are really a genuine leader of yourself and leader of your community, you have to practice this ethics of singularity. And this, I think that Jesus' leadership is exactly what trying to practice ethics of singularity. Paying attention to each face. Do you know the parable of this one lost sheep? Right? This calculation is not a kind of practical, pragmatic calculation, right? There is a 99 and then 1. It doesn't really match with this capitalist idea of this pragmatism. But this ethics of singularity is paying attention to each individual irreplaceable face of being. So, and then the second is double mode of seeing. So the leaders see the world of already and then world of not yet. Remembering the future. We usually think that we remember the past, but we have to remember the future. What kind of a world that you are envisioning? Jesus would say, reign of God, right? So that's again the Jesusian terminology, but the philosophical terminology is remembering the future, the world to come, where justice and equality and peace for all. And then the double mode of seeing is you see not only centers but the margin. Like Jesus did. If you want to follow Jesus, we have to follow this Jesusian mode of seeing, that you pay attention not only on the center but also the margin. And then three, so you expand this double mode of seeing to cosmopolitan mode of seeing, everywhere, everyone, everywhere. So you can extend this kind of cosmopolitan mode of seeing not only to human beings, but also what? Animals and plants. That's what I call cosmopolitan mode of seeing. So there is the philosopher by the name of Matthew Fox. He categorized Jesus as cosmic Christ. Jesus is not just Christ for human being, but Christ for cosmos, where all the living beings reside. And fourth, commitment to history, tradition. I introduce, you have a triple responsibility to history and tradition. First, actually, this comes from Jacques Derrida. He talks about the double responsibility. I added one without asking permission to Derrida. So first is affirmation. So he said to be is to inherit. Can you imagine all the languages and cultures, even this history of this, uniting college, everything, uniting church, it has history and tradition. So to be is to inherit. And then he goes on to say that inheritance is not a given, but a task. So first responsibility to your tradition and history is affirmation. You try to affirm what is really life affirming, so affirmation. So you have to examine your own history and tradition that you inherited. What to affirm? So there is a sense of continuity. But the other task and responsibility that you have to carry out to your tradition and history is contestation. I think Jesus was a really strong contester. He contests on the basis of what? It's always life giving. Contestation. So uniting church, uniting college, whatever community that you are engaging in, you have to try to find what to continue, affirmation, and what to discontinue, the contestation. And then that's not it. I added 3, innovation. You have to think about how to invent, how to create new tradition and new history. So that's the role that cosmopolitan leaders should exercise. And 5, I come up with justice literacy, how to enhance. So the leaders should be the enhancer of justice literacy. Because there are so many justices that we have to really engage in this 21st century. And 6 that I come up with is hospitality. How to complexify hospitality in this real world. It's about this neighbor love. Hospitality is about welcoming the other. Then you have to ask a question. What constitutes welcoming? And who are the neighbors in my perception? And 7 that I come up with is compassion. The leaders are the ones who exercise this ethics of compassion. And what is compassion? Compassion is compassion. Suffer with. Suffer with. So these are the cosmopolitan leadership that I think we have to exercise. And then there is always something that is not complete. So on the one hand, you have to think about the world as it is, and what to perform, what to contest, and what to innovate. And then you have to think about the world to come. And so this disparity between these two poles, that's what we have to think about. You are in this liminal space. How would you see the liminal space, in between space? This space is not the space of despair. This space, this disparity, is a space of your calling. It's a space of your responsibility, space of your engagement, space of your passion for the world to come. I hope that we all try to exercise even just part of this one. And then remember, one of the motto that I try to memorize all the time is small change can make a big difference. Right after my doctorate, I put the two post-it on my desk. One is fighting with pen. And the other one is a small change can make a big difference. Because I realized that one of the biggest enemies, when you try to make a change, one of the biggest enemy in this process of transformation is not outside, but yourself, the internal sense of defeatism. So I have to remind myself that, Namsoon, a small change can make a big difference. And I look at the history of, transformation. Sometimes women in the United States, they began, just 4 women began, this women's movement, and then tried to get the right to vote for women. And do you know how long it took? It took 72 years. The first women's national movement was, happening in 1848. And then the first year that women get a kind of granted the right to vote is 1920. So it took like 72 years. So those women who plant a seed for change, they never seen the fruit of the seed that they planted. And nowadays we just take for granted that, no question, right? No one says simply because you are women, you cannot vote. No, we just take it for granted. But we are enjoying that kind of privilege simply because someone was planting the seed for change. So even if they did not see the fruits of the seed that they planted, somehow they made a change. So I think this kind of motto, a small change can make a big difference, somehow was a reminder of the change that we have to engage in. So I hope that we are able to overcome a kind of sense of defeatism when you try to change anything at all. So I hope that you follow that kind of a daydreaming that Jesus was talking about, reign of God. I think he was a daydreamer, that he was always remembering this future to come. Okay, I will stop here. Thank you for your presence.
That is our MC.
Can you do that? Like, I'm gonna see how many hands that I have. That's what, because questions are really more important than answers. So I want to see, if the floor is open. I don't know how you do in this Australian culture. In the States, people just say the floor is open, right? Very interesting
Now we have
expression.
MC to
Oh, you are MC.
Good. Okay.
So I have to hand over the microphone to you. Okay.
Yeah, do I can talk?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I assume it. Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. That was, there's so many things to think about. I'm sure some of you may have some questions. So I might put it out to you. I can come around with the mic and then hand you so that I think that will be helpful for these people. But and then I'll
We
hand
have
the
only
mic back to
one
you.
mic.
Yeah, we only have the one.
Oh.
Yeah. It's
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
I want to see how many people raise hands. And then, when you go around, I will write down number 1, 2, and then I will see how to respond to the question, because I really want to hear all the questions or comments. So when you say the floor is open for the people online, when you say the floor is open, you can say you can do 3 things. One is questions, and second is comments with your experience, and third is clarification. You can ask for clarification of what I said. Can you do that? Yeah. So first round, I will see how many hands that I have. Okay, then you can hand this over to the person who raised. Come on.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I was very hurriedly scribbling notes the whole time. I'm a student at this college, and I'm really interested in your experiences teaching in the US over the last couple of years, particularly with the rise of Christian nationalism, a really strong pushback against a lot of social justice progress that has been made over the last 5 to 10 years, and whether that's changed the sort of questions you're asked by students, the responses you get, and certainly the willingness of students to work with each other beyond theological barriers and differences.
Professor Kang, I'd like to hear a little bit about your concept of theologians without passports, and this idea of a beyond community that you explore in some of your work as well.
Well, my question is whether the first love of Beethoven is Adelaide. Is that true? First lover of Beethoven is Adelaide. Is that correct? No, this is joke. I've got another question, but I'm glad to hear the German way of saying Adelaide. I really enjoy, because I know Adelaide is from King William's wife, and he named Adelaide City as his wife, but he put the main road as his name, King William Road. So yeah. Actually, I'm evangelical pastor from Christian Church, and you mentioned a lot about singularity of ethics of singularity as a like part of love practice of Jesus Christ. Actually, when I migrated to Australia, immigration department was called indigenous and ethnic affairs. So I didn't like that. So I contested. So I think, I don't know how somehow it changed and now it's called home affairs, something like that, yeah. So it become more singularity concept. Now, my question is, you talked about practice of love in the eyes of Jesus Christ, and I would like to know, in your view, what is the holiness of Jesus Christ or God in the Old Testament and New Testament? So just want to know how you see the holiness. That is the kind of, in my concept, is Kaddish, is distinguishing and sin and, not sinning and so on. So I just want to know how you see that as a theologian in your view. That's it.
I am very interested in Indigenous issues here in Australia, and the idea of talking about everything as being cosmological and everywhere and whatever leaves me a little bit struggling in my thinking about what does it mean to take seriously the people who God placed here and who have had colonisation or whatever word you want to use come and take over. I'm interested in terms of some of the things you've talked about and how they intersect with those kind of issues.
My university is located in, I'm responding the first question. Number one, since I do not know your proper name, I would say number one, number two, number three, number four, but that doesn't mean that I disregard your singularity. So, my university is located in Texas, and you know the name, the Texas. What does it imply when people hear the Texas? And then the combination of Texas and the Christian, right, university. So there was a time that my university tried to change the name because there are so many students and faculty that who are not Christian. But the founder of this university, they were, really decide to stick to this name. So they usually say TCU, the acronym of this university. But my university is really progressive in terms of this, the interpretation of Christianity, and in terms of this gender issue, the issue of sexual minority. And our school is not just a divinity school. It has many different, 8 different kind of school. School of journalism, a school of art, everything. But this rise of Christian nationalism is really serious. It matters because it's not only about what's going on within the United States, because what is happening in the United States can really affect what's going on in the world. So my student, that's why I always say that Jesus and then Christianity as an institutionalized religion. I always, whenever I mention Christianity, I say Christianity as an institutionalized religion. You have to think about Jesus on the one hand, and then on the other, the Christianity as an institution. There is a huge discrepancy. I always emphasize these two poles are not identical. So, for example, you have to really go back to Jesus. So some evangelical students would really love to hear it, right? We have to go back to Jesus. But my interpretation of Jesus might not be different from what they imagine about Jesus. That's why in Korean, I wrote about Jesus the philosopher. To save, in quotation mark, to save Jesus from institutionalized religion. Because this rise of Christian nationalism is not just happening in the States. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And then they use Christianity to maximize this national interest. And they really use and misuse the Christians as a tool to maximize their interests. So I think that you have to remind Jesus of, remind about Jesus, what his life and teaching implies to us who are living in this 21st century, where all kinds of injustice and discrimination and conflict and wars has been going on. So that's my teaching as a teacher. Yeah, I do not know how to categorize myself as theologian or philosopher. I mean, because this politics of naming, I always began with this naming issue. Okay, it has something to do with theologians without passport. I suppose you read my the English writing somehow, right? Are you the number 2, right?
That's right.
Yes. Sorry. One of the writing that I mentioned about is theologians should be without passport. What do you mean by passport? You have an exclusive sense of belonging. When you say that passport implies your citizenship, right? And then when theologians cling to this one form of citizenship, the passport, whether it is about Christianity or whatever, then you become a kind of confine yourself to the doctrinal issues, institutional matters. So when I say theologian without passport, you have to free yourself from any kind of institutionalized religion, because your focus should be on the life. So that was my initial idea about theologians without passport. Of course, I have a passport. So when I say passport, it has a kind of metaphor that you have an exclusive sense of belonging. So someone says there is the John Caputo that I really like as a scholar and also as a human being. He said, how do you define theologians and philosophers? He said theologians are the who has a membership, whereas philosophers are freelancer. So perhaps, but for me, theologian, philosopher, theologian, I always use philosopher, theologian, or theologian, philosopher. That how to identify myself is that I do not want to, exercise exclusive membership to certain things. I'm not fired yet, so. But I feel like I really try to focus on how to live well together. Not just romantic way, but metaphorically and also politically and socially. In our reality, how to live well together. Then how to enhance our sense of justice for all. So that's my sort of identity as a theologian, philosopher, theologian, even if I do not want to just hold on to one type of identity. So I hope that I respond to your question about what do I mean by theologians without passport. And, I always think about, I have been labeled in many ways as I'm responding to the question 3, third question. And you have to think about this. There is a politics of naming. For example, indigenous. Who came up with this idea of indigenous? Who would that be? So-called the indigenous people, they didn't come up with this idea about this labeling themselves. They are just a human being who lived here. And then all of a sudden, those people who are outside, they label, oh, you are indigenous. And when I come here, this is my 20th year at my university. 20th year. And there was time that I'm labeled as faculty of color. Whenever I go to the conference, there is a accreditation body, ATS. They have a kind of conference. And whenever they label me as faculty of color, I raise my hand and I say, I refuse to be labeled as such. Those whose skin color is so-called white, they do not have any label. They do not have any label. They are just faculty. And then all of a sudden, if you do not have any white body, they are labeled as faculty of color. And then what happens? When you label someone as such, what happens?
The mark of the plural.
Yes, the mark of the plural. All of a sudden, I am me. I am just who I am. That's my identity. I am who I am, and then I am who I become. That's my sort of favorite identity. And then all of a sudden, when someone labeled me as faculty of color or woman of color, all of a sudden I homogenized. So officially, even in my school, I said I do not want to be labeled as such. Because the mainstream is maintained its power with the absence of a special marker. The absence of a special marker is the way that the mainstream maintains its power, hegemonic power. For example, when you say you're a writer, you imagine male writer, and then women writer, women professor, women journalist, reporter. I mean, all of a sudden, those who do not have any special label, they maintain the hegemonic power, the absence of a special marker. So usually, there was a writing that I criticized. This is so-called indigenous theology. I mean, all of a sudden, you are pigeonized. Your theology doesn't have a universal, implication. It is a kind of intellectual sort of the entertainment, I call it. So whenever I got an invitation from other university, can you talk about this from Asian perspective? Then I refuse to accept the invitation because I want to talk about what I am interested in. But if you pigeonhole me into just Asian, which implies it doesn't have any universal connotation. It's just we are listening to what Asian would think. So one of the chapter that I was working on at the time is who are Asians? Because wherever I go, I was so tired of being labeled. So personally, I'm very critical about these labels, indigenous, with good intention. But all of a sudden, they are just end up being just mark of the plural. They don't have any singularity. That we are suppressing the heterogeneity of the person, which means the stereotyping is the beginning of oppression. You stereotype people into the categories. The indigenous people, what do you think? They are frozen to the past. So personally, of course, Adelaide, I know I love that song. When I play piano, I really love playing that Adelaide. But I would refuse to be labeled as indigenous pastor or whatever. And I had to fight to take off all kind of labels that has been on to me, even in my university. Yeah, so that's my personal sharing. And so we have to remember the politics of naming. Who is naming certain things? And then the tyranny of labeling. There is a kind of tyranny of labeling. So the labeling is always someone who are in power. They are the ones who give the name and then label certain group of people with good intention sometimes. And then the number 4, I think it has something to do with this number 3 questions that indigenous, you are the number 4, right? Why don't we just say the content of the issues that we are dealing with? Why you have to label as indigenous? Why? That's my personal appeal. Once you label, your singularity, your individuality got suppressed. All of a sudden, oh, those indigenous people. So I am personally very against, critical about those labeling, because even if you have a good intention, your intentionality doesn't work. As a person who have been labeled many times in a different kind of context, I always refuse to be labeled. Right? I am me. Don't label me. I have to use Michel Foucault. He said, don't label me. You know, I refuse to be labeled. For him, it's not about ethnic racial label, but you know, someone who's labeling him as a postmodernist, he refused to be labeled whatsoever. Whatsoever. That's me. I mean, personally, I refuse to be labeled. Right. So this term, I think, you know, there are many labels that somehow you have to adopt, but you have to. So strategic labeling. Sometimes we need a strategic labeling, right? Strategic. So Catherine Spivak, she talks about strategic essentialism. Strategic means it should not go forever. Should not be permanent labeling. But strategically, sometimes you have to politicize certain group of people, and then you need to label them, like women. But there are some philosophers who says there are no women because women cannot be homogenized. There are so many people, you know, labeled as women. They are so different, and men as well. But at the same time, this kind of essentialism, sometimes we need it to politicize. But it should be strategic. It should not be the permanent label. I don't know whether you know what I'm saying makes sense to you, but that's the kind of daily protest that I sort of have to make. Wherever I go, I am labeled as women, as Korean, or as Asian, as if what I'm saying doesn't have any universal connotation. So intentionally, I never, offer classes that has a label like Asian things or Korean things. So courses that I offer: postmodernism, postcolonialism, feminism, cosmopolitanism, and Jacques Derrida. Something has to do with how to enhance our critical thinking in the world, because every theory is a box of tools. So the question that we have to ask is whether it is indigenous or not. But the question is whether it has offered us a kind of a tool, the small tools that with which we can really utilize in enhancing justice, peace, equality for all. That's my position. If you are willing, can some of you share? This is my sort of concept of the day. concept of the evening. Do I have some time? Perhaps 5 minutes? I'm asking to you. Because I was the only person who just talk, right? So I want to really hear what you have experienced here. So just don't offer any explanation because of the time constraints, but just share 10 seconds what you're gonna take away from here.
Revelation.
Revelation.
Practice.
Practice.
Reverse hospitality. Reverse hospitality.
Oh, reverse hospitality.
Double seeing.
Double mode of seeing. Good.
Cosmos.
Cosmos.
The world to be.
World tree. Yeah.
Small change can make a difference.
Oh, small change can make a big difference.
Big difference.
Yes, small change can make a big difference. That's my daily motto. I remind myself that small change can make a big difference. I hope that you all remember that a small change can make a big difference. And I hope that you have to be the leader of yourself first and the leader for others to enhance justice, peace, equality for all, everyone, everywhere. Thank you.
Enjoy your supper. Yeah. One more thing, we are all hungry. But please go ahead with the food. Thank you so much. 온라인에 계신 분들 감사합니다. 네. 저녁 때 가세요. 네.
I didn't realize it's 5 minutes. Yes.